Good morning. Drew, thank you. Before I start, I just want to say thank you to Sydney. Where are you, Sydney Beckett? Drew, Adam, for all the work you've done to help me get up here today. And Emily, make sure you get a really good picture of me with the MIA thing, because this may be my only opportunity to be in front of that logo. So I guess I'll start my timer. Survival. So what is survival? State or fact of continuing to live or exist, typically in spite of an accident, ordeal, difficult circumstances. So when after speaking with Drew about this project, of course, I went right to Google and thought, well, maybe that'll help me get started. So I came upon the definition, continuing to live or exist. Live is kind of the piece that I'm going to talk about today. But then when I went and looked for pictures, of course, I got the Survivor TV show. So there's a little, I'm sure, a social commentary there somewhere that when we think about survivors and survivorship, that we turn to TV immediately. But at the top, at the little bar there, after Titanic, you'll see images about cancer survivor, leukemia survivor, and there's a lot of work and really good things that take place in our country celebrating survivorship from some really tough things. I also just wanted to say that, there's surviving 7th grade science, which I did from Bernie Fikema, who used to hit us with meter sticks if we weren't paying attention. There's either surviving adolescence or maybe surviving our children being adolescents. So there's all kinds of survival and survivors. But really what I'm going to talk about today is a personal project that I've been working on since 2010, which we call Transfer of Memory, which is a touring exhibition of portraits of Holocaust survivors who lived in Minnesota, and their stories, or accompanying stories about them. This really was my first attempt, or my first project at art, or using my craft as art and my craft as a photographer, where I think in general I'm recording and reporting something, shooting for the Timberwolves, shooting for any of my other clients. It's really make an image, report it, and this became a gateway into an art project for me. So what I would like to do to start is introduce you to some of the survivors that we photographed or we made portraits of, and which illustrate different themes about survivorship and how our survivors survived the Holocaust. And this text is on the website, transferofmemory.org. This, I'd like to introduce you to Eva Gross and Ella Weiss. This is, I'm sorry, I'm away from the mic. Mother and daughter. Ella Weiss died at 101 years old in January of 2011. This story is entitled Inseparable. There are so many Holocaust stories of families being separated during the war. The story of Ella Weiss and her daughter Eva Gross is a tale of the devotion of a mother and daughter who together survived deportation from their small Hungarian town, 6 concentration camps, including Auschwitz, forced labor, death marches, and finally liberation. When the Hungarian police came for Eva and her family, Eva's aged grandfather had a premonition of what was to come. A religious man, he did not take his talit and tefillin, his ritual prayer objects. He said, "Mein kin, my children, where we are going, I won't need it." How Eva and Ella stayed together was a miracle. My mother and I made up our minds that whatever had to be done, we would do to survive. They protected each other through stays in 6 concentration camps. On their arrival to Auschwitz, another inmate warned them to register using different last names because the Nazis were separating family members. Ella used her maiden name and Eva took her father's last name. They stayed together. When guard dogs attacked Ella for using the latrine, Eva bandaged her leg with scraps of cloth torn from her dress so that the guards wouldn't discover her injury. When Ella had trouble using the sewing machines in the factory where they worked, Eva did both jobs so that Ella wouldn't be shipped out. In the winter of 1945, they were forced to march to Bergen-Belsen. With no coats or shoes, many people died of starvation and exposure. My mother gave up hope. She grew weak and couldn't go on. She said, "Let me die here." A guard told us to drag her. "You are almost there." We made it to Bergen-Belsen, where the English liberated us. Today, Eva speaks frequently at schools. Her message is always the same. Don't hate. It's a terrible thing. Everyone is born innocent. There is no reason to hate. So, Eva Gross, Ella Weiss, a story of love to help get through the Holocaust. This is Joe Grossnacht. You can see his tattoo on his forearm. Joe says, without hope, you don't survive. But he also told us that it was his strength, his personal strength, and perseverance that helped him survive. This is Jack Sutton. Jack Sutton survived by fighting back. He and his wife Rochelle were members of the Polish partisans and lived in the forest during the war. This is Victor Vital. Victor survived by the kindness of a friend who helped get them false papers, and then he hid in the Greek mountains when the Nazis came into Greece and started the deportations. So the transfer of memory is about survivorship. It now comprises 44 images and stories of 52 survivors. The walls that you see here and the framing and everything, we were able to get a grant shortly after we started the project in 2010. And through the grant, we were able to establish the website, establish Transfer of Memory as a traveling exhibition. And so these cards that you see being held actually come up off the wall and allow people to read the stories. And I should just make a side note here. We titled the exhibition Transfer of Memory because of where we are in time. We're 70 years since the end of World War II, and the stories of the witnesses of the Holocaust are dying with the survivors as they age and die out. So our objective here was to transfer that memory, to transfer the memories of the people who experienced it and use their words and their images to continue telling those stories. The exciting piece of the exhibition and the project is that it has a life of its own. My partner, Jewish Community Relations Council, has done an incredible job of booking places for the exhibit to go. The bottom of the list is cut off on this, but if you go to the website, transferofmemory.org, you can see where the full exhibition will be. We've been to we've been south, we've been north, we've been way north, but it's really gratifying to see that our work of memorializing and the stories of these Holocaust survivors has taken a life of its own. And the exhibit goes out with or without us. Just a couple comments on the technical piece of the project. As I said, we started the project in 2010, and I went to the Jewish Community Relations Council looking for a partner. We put out a community call for survivors, and people started responding. And we went into their homes and made portraits with them, interviewed them, and then now are able to show the project. This is Max and Edith Goodman, photographed in their home. One of the questions that I get is people ask, well, did we Photoshop this? Did we enhance the images? Because everybody looks so good. So we did have a makeup artist with us for each of the shoots, not to make people look anything different than they normally are, but to really help them look their best. And that was important to me, that my subjects felt good and looked good. In terms of Photoshop, one thing that I did do is Max had a little bit of lunch on the front of his pants. Right there. And so we did clean that image up. This is George Sorosi. We again made this portrait in his home. My makeup artist wanted to move his glasses from his sweater. And you'll see another image later, I'll try to comment, where Leo Weiss has his tie tucked into his pants. And so I wanted to capture everyone in their natural setting and how they lead their daily life. And so if that's how George kept his glasses when we were visiting with him, that's exactly how I wanted to leave it. This is Riva and Ben Keyboard. We photographed Riva, her sister, and her brother, who all survived and ended up moving to Minneapolis. And they're all part of the exhibit. One note on this is the most photoshopped image of the entire collection. And I think it was Ben that we swapped eyes or swapped a head just because there was two of them and I was not able to capture one image where both looked good. And the funny thing is Riva to this day says, oh, that's the greatest picture that's was ever taken of us. So, which is a great compliment, but I also smile a little bit because I know it had a little bit of help. But they're lovely, lovely people. And really, I guess the main point here about how we set up or didn't set up the images or adjusted anything. This is Sam Sadie in his home at the Shalom home in St. Paul. And frankly, there's no way that we could have built this image or created this image of Sam where we did this in the summer and he still had his Hanukkah menorah out. He's got the pictures of his grandchildren who were well beyond those years. He's got his cardboard tzedakah box, his charity box was all right there. And I do have to make note, I don't know if you can see very well, but the plastic covering on the lamp and the couch. There's just no way to stage that image of Sam Sadie, so who we love very much. I refer to each of these images by name, and that was a sensitivity that I really wanted to keep. I did say we have 44 images, 52 survivors. That's about as far as you'll get me to put numbers to any of the survivors. As you saw Joe Gross, many of the survivors had their numbers tattooed on them. Their identities were taken from them, their families were taken from them. So it was really important that at this stage in their lives that we treated them with the utmost respect. And this portrait is always referred to as Sam Sadie. It's not portrait number 35. And our very capable crew that does the setup and takedown, I spent a lot of time with them talking about that sensitivity and appreciation for the experience that the survivors had. One of the big issues that I had as a photographer was trying to figure out, do we shoot in color, do we shoot in black and white? And when we made the decision about presenting everything in color, the exhibition and everything on the website is in color, I pulled the best images that we had and printed them both so that we could make side-by-side comparisons. For those of you that are photographers, I limited myself to one speed light. I tried to use a very fast lens, wide open at like 1.2, and a tripod. So it's very limited in terms of equipment. The image on the left made with my professional Canon equipment, image on the right of Jack Sutton made with a Holga, which was the only film camera that I still owned because the rest of them got sold so that we could replace our picture window in our front living room many years ago. After sitting for 5 years, I finally sold them at a discount. But so you can see a lot of differences. Those of you that are familiar with the Holga toy camera, just a whole lot of limitations. So the last note on Jack Sutton, we did not stage this image other than moving these images to his right a little bit so that we could see all of them. Jack wasn't going to participate in the project because his wife, Rochelle, had died just a few minutes prior. But what I love about this picture is that Rochelle is in this image. The portrait at the top right is their wedding portrait, maybe right after the war, maybe taken when they were still partisans. The image sort of at his chest level is young marrieds living in Minneapolis, and the image on the bottom right is a more recent portrait of the two of them. So Jack Sutton, and this we saw a lot, lots of photographs. Leo Weiss, again, this was sort of our marquee image. You can see his tie tucked into his pants, which we made sure to keep. This was a real conversation for us. Do we do color, black and white? This is Sam Rafowitz and Victor Vitale. So a lot of these images, Charles Fedor, I really love the black and white images. And so a shameless plug here, I put on the collaboration wall, we're looking for a designer to help us design a book, a fine art book of the black and whites which have not been exhibited. And I know I'm almost out of my 20 minutes, so I'm gonna be really fast. Okay, so I didn't do this project alone. I had really, really great partners. Laura Zell and Susie Greenberg, who are here today from the Jewish Community Relations Council, my champions, funders, did everything, helped recruit, organize, and are so important to making sure that transfer of memory continues to live and grow and be seen by people all over the state of Minnesota and becomes part of the conversation about how we treat other people and how we treat ourselves. I should also note Lily Chester, who is not here, did the writing, listened to these really terrible interviews that I did with all the survivors, and was able to glean themes and messages from all the interviews. So that's all on the website, and you can check that out. So transfer of memory, my first foray into art from, whoops, I'm supposed to be done. Okay, from recording and reporting to art. So the beautiful thing about transfer of memory, or one of the beautiful things, is that it gave me the opportunity to be asked to participate in a recent exhibit called Retelling. To retell is to tell a story again or differently. There are about 8 local artists, different media, painters, sculptors, me as a photographer, were asked to take paintings by Fritz Hirschberger and tell his story in our narrative, use our art to retell his story. So there were a lot of things about this painting of a woman walking to the gas chambers at Auschwitz, holding a baby and with 3 young children. And the barbed wire fence and the text painted into the barbed wire. So I want to read this text to you because it really spoke to me this spring when the project was presented to me. Fear not your enemies, for they can only kill you. Fear not your friends, for they can only betray you. Fear only the indifferent, who permit the killers and betrayers to walk safely on earth. So I'm like going, oh my God, this is today. This text was written right after the Holocaust by Edward Yashinsky and painted into the painting of Fritz Hirschberger. So this is the original photograph that Hirschberger used as his inspiration. This photograph appears in an album called the Auschwitz album. If you Google the Auschwitz album, you can find the entire 193 photographs that comprise the Auschwitz album, the images of the arrival and selection process at Auschwitz. And it's the most eerie and surreal experience looking at this. And for me, it struck home because these photographers photographed trains of Jewish deportees arriving and being selected, some going to work camps, some going to the death chambers. They covered it just like Emmerly is covering today's event. There's something going on, it's matter of fact, we're just gonna document it. So here you had a painting that started as a photograph with text that resonated with me entirely. So this is the image that I created, Indifference, and I'm just gonna read my artist statement and then I'm done. Hirschberger's Indifference is based on a photograph of an older woman walking to the gas chamber with young children in her care. The image is one of 193 Nazi photographs that comprise the Auschwitz album that document the arrival, selection, and processing of one or more transports of Jews at Auschwitz-Birkenau in May, June of 1944. The Auschwitz album is both chaotic and orderly. Jews are moving, getting off of trains, walking to the gas chambers. Jews are static, standing in long lines, waiting, being inspected. Smoke from the crematorium is in the background. Barbed wire is ever present. Despite being made on sunny days, the images are dark and sorrowful. Jews are pictured in large groups, yet Hirschberger selected an image of a solitary experience, a single Jewish woman and her charges. Hirschberger reminds us that while the Holocaust was a crime against all Jews, it was the individuals who were murdered. Yashinsky's poetic and profound words, painted into the barbed wire, tells us that the guilty include those who knew but did nothing. Indifference is the barbed wire that allows betrayal and killing. In 2017, hate language is acceptable again. Hate actions are acceptable again. We turn away. We don't speak out for fear of offending or reprisal. How do we find the courage to not be indifferent? The photographic image was completely created in camera without Photoshop effects. It is at once moving and static, chaotic and orderly. We move fluidly between the roles of sufferer, betrayer, killer, and being the true evil, the enabler, the indifferent. Who are you? Thank you very much.